because if we don't have a seat at the table, Mario, then we're going to get whatever crap they want to shove down our throats. And by a seat at the table, if we can get enough people to position into physical gold and silver and hold it, then they're going to have to listen to the fact that we want a more fair monetary system with, oh, dare I say it, a component of gold in there to create fiscal responsibility. Right? You were talking about politics before. I never get political because it doesn't matter what party is in place. Their job is to legalize the theft of the banks, of the private corporations.
Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Lynette Zang of Zang Enterprises again. Lynette, how are you?
I am very happy to be here, Mario. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And for the viewers, if you want to learn more about Lynette, go to the Lynette Zang on YouTube, and I'm going to put all the other social media links below in the description. Lynette, we spoke maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I think, maybe a little longer ago, and you just started out your own venture, and I hope that's going well.
It is going well. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. What I wanted to ask you first today is I've seen that recently you been talking about the fact that the markets look vulnerable and that there could be a crash. And I've noticed as well today as we speak, it's August 28th, that the 2s10s yield curve spread is actually only at -3. So it's really close to disinverting. So let's start with what you're seeing in terms of the market. We saw beginning of August, we saw a little bit of a tremor. Things seem to have calmed down. But yeah, how do you see that going forward? And then you can touch upon the yield curve and the economy in the US.
Absolutely. Well, I think we may have started the melt up process where the recognition of the crisis and what's happening with the currencies are imminent. And so, people have been trained to think that the only place to put your wealth is into these manipulated markets. But yes, with the changes that they've had in the markets, with that 24-hour fix and all of this, I think that Powell had to finally pivot because obviously we're not even getting any good data on unemployment. And how can you really they're so data dependent. I guess I wonder how they can make any good determination of what's going on if the data that they're working with is super faulty. But I see the Fed pivot as a way to keep these markets going up, to keep what's really happening with the currency and the entire fragile system going down. And so maybe we are at the melt up stage where it doesn't matter. I mean, reality doesn't really matter. Can you please tell me where you can see reality and know that when you're looking at this data, that what you're looking at is accurate?
Yeah, they just recently revised the non-farm by 818,000 lower for over 12 months. And what you said about reality is also really, it's something that's affecting not just finance and money, but it's affecting health, it's affecting politics, it's affecting geopolitics. So, I mean, I've been of the opinion as well that the markets or stock markets, that is, and even the bond markets are really difficult to predict because even if we see a big correction, let's say in the next 3 weeks before the Fed meeting, the Fed will make sure that that things rebound because the system is so long in the tooth, like in terms of debt. So could you touch upon that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what happens when they lower interest rates is there is more debt that is then created. So we have all of these corporations and governments that are up against this wall of debt. And we're also looking at the fragile labor market, the fragile consumer market, and we're seeing so many disconnects. Like a great example is consumer confidence is up, and yet so is the fear of losing your job. What is it? 7 out of 10 workers have concerns about losing their job and then getting a new one. So, I think that that's more about around the election and hopium than what the reality is. And also, the other piece of it is we're not in a recession, right? But how much of that GDP growth is actually inflation, forcing people to spend more, right? For the same goods and services, for the necessities that they've had, and the level of debt that they've taken on, and not just in the US, but on a global basis, the level of debt that consumers have taken on, and yet they're here touting the strong consumer when, it looks just the opposite to me.
I saw the other day a chart, I think it was from Bank of America, that delinquencies for credit cards are rising and they're quite high. So the consumer seems to be suffering. And as for GDP, I would also add that if you look at the formula for GDP, it includes government spending. They call it investment just to make it look better. But if the government, US is running a deficit of almost 7% of GDP, if you strip that out, GDP would be like probably negative. So it's all seems to be a Potemkin economy for me. And just wanted to ask you as well about how you see gold and silver doing and how high they could go. Yeah, in the next few months, and also if there were to be some kind of crisis, because there's a lot of people who are always worried that gold and silver will correct. But personally, I think it's the only thing that seems to be real in this world right now in terms of monetary, uh, yeah, in terms of money, because everything else is so false, like you said.
That's true. So I want to talk about gold and silver, but we also about the yield curve and how the 2-year and 30-year are no longer inverted, and we are close to being not inverted, but reverted, or the 10 should be higher than the 2, and maybe that will happen soon. And actually, if you look back on the charts, that's kind of when they go back to a more normal looking yield curve is really when you get the recession. So you should always be careful about what you look for. And then when you're looking, so when that happens, that's when we could absolutely see some kind of correction in this melt up market. But people need to understand that when everybody thinks that the stock market and the bond market, Wall Street is the only place to invest, and they're trying to go away from this loss of purchasing power that we experience with all the money printing, then they fly to the stock market. But when you ask me how high can the numbers on gold and silver go, it really is all about that confidence. And the loss of confidence and the loss of support in the system as inflation rears its ugly head again, because they haven't conquered this monster that they created. The monster, the money printing monster that they created, is a big reason why their increase of interest rates, along with government spending, to your point, Mario. But the all of that money printing is still sloshing around inside of the system. And when we're looking at these fragile markets, how much are they going to print this time? Because isn't lowering the interest rates about enabling corporations governments and entities to take on more debt, when to your point also with the Bank of America showing the default rates, and it's not just on credit cards, but it's on all levels of debt, are moving up. The default rate is moving up. So, I mean, in my mind, we're absolutely at the end, but I can tell you that if they were to do the reset today on, here's this maybe a bit easier to see, on gold, I mean, the true fundamental value of an ounce of gold, and I know people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but in terms of this garbage, is like 40,000 an ounce. Now, if you went back to 1900 and you told somebody, because this is a $20 gold piece, that someday this would be north of 2,500, they would have looked at you like you had three heads too. But that's only because they put value in these numbers. So in the short term, we've had all sorts of breakouts, and I don't know where gold or silver needs to conclude its cup in the US. It's concluded it, that formation, that accumulation formation. It's done it in a number of other currencies, just not yet in the US dollar. But I think that silver will go and conclude that cup. We could see it by year's end. We have the elections in here, so that always kinds of muddies the water even a little bit more. But what I think with spot gold, I think we'll easily see on the spot market 3,000 an ounce or even more. And I think that it's possible that both of those numbers could be hit by year end. But we'll see. I could be right, I could be wrong.
Yeah, and if you look at countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Brazil in the 80s, their stock markets and asset prices were highly elevated, but their currencies were dropping. I mean, they were dropping really, really fast. Well, they're dropping more than the markets were going up. That's what happens in the hyperinflation, and I have a feeling that that's what could happen, not just in the US, but the whole of Western Europe, because we're talking about a Fed pivot now. But if you look at the M2 chart, yes, it dipped down a little bit in the last 2 years, but it's still way higher than it was prior to 2020, and it's picking up again. So is that what you expect? The stock market melting up, but gold and silver and other hard assets melting up even more?
Yes, exactly. And the other part of that is the dollar, right? So they're saying, oh, gold has pulled back a little bit because of the strength of the dollar. Well, the theory is that why would you buy gold when you can get interest on government debt? And they want you to think that that's risk-free. I don't consider it risk-free. Pretty sure you don't consider it risk-free. But so in theory, if they take the interest rates down, then the dollar will get weaker, which in theory is good for gold. But that's only because they create these illusions that the dollar actually has any value. When you go and you look, the only reason why it even still retains, officially anyway, 3 cents out of its original dollar's worth of purchasing power. The only reason that it does that is because the public still has confidence in it. They cannot but help to think that this should regain some of its former. And after all, why aren't people happier that inflation has come down? Inflation hasn't come down. It's the rate and speed that the prices are moving up has slowed a bit, but food is still extraordinarily expensive. And you have greedflation that goes in there as well. I mean, they're looking at the merger of 2 grocery stores, Kroger and I don't remember what the other one is, but they're coming out and talking about how the pricing on eggs and milk, which are staple products for most people, were pushed up. Those prices were pushed up far higher than their costs were pushed up. Well, of course, let's have a monopoly on everything because isn't that what we've been seeing right along is a consolidation in banking, a consolidation in media, a consolidation in food, a consolidation in everything, putting more and more power into fewer and fewer hands, regardless of them making it look like you have all sorts of choices. The only way that you can really retain those choices is for people to come together in community and be as self-sufficient and independent as possible. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, arguably the most important point these days, as well as shelter. These are all of the things and all of the tools that we all need so that if a central bank says jump, you can say, nope, not going to jump. And starting with sound money that is truly outside of the system. I mean, that's why having physical gold and silver in your possession is so important right now. Because if you don't, when the hyperinflation hits, when they try to shift us into a full surveillance economy, and you have nothing, when they say jump, you're going to have to say how high.
Yeah, and you're speaking about being self-sufficient, self-reliant, having communities, and I agree with that. Um, and money, gold and silver is just part of it. And you spoke about health, the fact that big corporations monopolize not just food, but health, banking, the media. And I just wanted to ask you because I try to stay away from picking a side in politics because historically that's really bad thing in my opinion because all politicians seem to disappoint. Um, what they tell us prior to the election is usually not the truth of what they do when they're in power. But I was watching recently an interview. Uh, Tucker Carlson interviewed Bobby Kennedy Jr. and they were speaking about the food, well, not well, the health industry, how yes, how corrupt it is, how they're FDA, CDC, and NIH, and it gives you some hope that maybe if Trump wins, he's going to look into that. But I think, like you said, it's better to do it yourself than try to depend on someone to change it. And he also interviewed these siblings, Kali and Casey Means, and they're speaking about also the food industry, like the big corporations, and how Americans are so unhealthy because of ultra processed foods. So maybe you could touch upon that because you have your own food and garden and mini farm, right?
Oh, yes. Actually, I have two. And honestly, Mario, it really started, I have to credit my sister Beth Ellen for it because she was constantly telling me, read the labels, read the labels, read the labels. But I want to touch on something a little bit earlier, then I'll come back to that. When they were setting up this system, one of the things that they wanted was for the public to be distracted. So if they could, through inflation, eliminate the purchasing power of the currency, since corporations really wanted to pay workers less, well, then workers would have to work more and harder and would not have as much time to pay attention. In the 50s, they started really, meaning the government, started subsidizing entities like McDonald's, which basically converted the entire food system. And so there's not a lot of nutrition in the food that we buy. And we certainly saw, I started paying attention to labels when I got pregnant because then it mattered more. I was growing babies. And so I've been on this path for a very long time. I became uncomfortable with two things. number one, being an economist and looking at what's happening and being quite clear that this is a currency life cycle issue and that we've got to transition from the current debt-based system into a new system because it's over. We're at the end of its life cycle. So I knew that food became the single biggest issue for most people. And look around the world, we can see that happening all over the world, food insecurity. But also, I mean, I was buying organic before it was popular to buy organic. And when you went in and bought an apple, you know, it had blemishes on it. It looked like it was just picked from a tree. Once Big Pharma and the food companies saw that people were willing to pay more for this, they took it over. They tweaked all of the rules. So, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, I absolutely lost trust in the food system a while ago. When the system died in 2008, 100%, I knew that the old system died and they just had to keep us on. They had to do something to transition us into a new system. And knowing that food becomes the biggest issue for people and being someone that likes to feed people, that's when I started my urban farm. But it really was because I no longer had confidence in the grocery store, in the food system, and also because I am quite clear on where we are in this trend cycle. And I'm glad that I did. Because in 2020, here I am walking around my property thinking, wow, I'm really smart. Look at this. When others couldn't get food at the grocery store, I was fine. I had so much that I had the ability to share with others that didn't have the toilet paper or the food or the other things. But what I missed was that there were riots that were near my house because I'm near the Capitol. I'm in dead central Phoenix, and also up in Scottsdale, which is a different kind of neighborhood. But there were riots in places that I did not think there were going to be riots. And so that's when I went and found my bug out location. And I've been working furiously by putting in orchards and putting in hot houses and all of this. And, what was it, 3 weeks ago or 3.5 weeks ago, whenever that was, when the markets plunged, I have to tell you that I thought that could have been the beginning of the end. It really, for me, because everybody's like, oh, you're going to your bug out, are you going to your bug out? It's not when something happens that is a warning. And I'm wondering, which warning are people going to take heed of and make the changes or start to prepare so that you actually are more ready then than you are now for an implosion? It really is about public confidence. And that's what I waited to see. Did this event trickle down to the public? Because what we know is that everything we're looking at, Mario, it's fiction. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Just believe the garbage that they're throwing out there and just keep doing. They just want to keep it together enough so that you don't make changes. You don't ask for more money, right, at your work. And you don't grow your own food and you don't buy gold or silver, or you just keep doing what you normally do. Because frankly, how do you capture a wild boar? Well, that's how you do it. You put a fence up with food there and they come in and they eat. And at first, they might be nervous about that one side of a fence, but you give them enough food and they get used to it. And then you put the second side up, but you keep giving them food. Then you put the third side up and they get used to it. You keep giving them food. And before you know it, you got the fourth side up and people are trapped. And if I'm looking at that and I'm looking at where we are, I would say 3 of those sides are already up. So your opportunity to get prepared is winding down. It really is that simple. They push the stock markets up because that's what people look at, because we've been trained to think that that's going to reflect what's really happening in the economy. When the reality is, and you know this as well as I do, probably even better, because you worked in the city of London for so long, that everything has been turned into a trading instrument for Wall Street's benefit, not yours.
Yes, and um, I also like about 10 years ago when I moved house here in the UK, I signed up to the local GP and they made me do like a blood test and I found out that I was just going type 2 diabetes. And I've even made a video about it like 6, 7 years ago, how I reversed type 2 diabetes. And it really helped me understand a bit more about health. Because when I went to see the GP, I tried to ask him, what's this all about? How did I get it? And he said, oh, don't worry, just take the metformin. And and I was
Yep.
a little bit suspicious. He wanted me to leave his office. I think they just want to bring in as many patients as possible. But then I listened to Dr. Holberg, Sarah Holberg, she did a TED talk years ago about diabetes, and well, I took matters into my own hand. I don't have like an urban farm, but all I did was watch what I ate, cut the carbohydrates, ate more protein, exercise more. So, in a way, I would say here in the UK and Europe, we're a bit luckier with the food industry because I don't think it's been as captured as it has in the US.
Yes.
I mean, you look at videos about people show people in the States and people in Italy, I mean, there are of course uh, people in Italy that are overweight, but the majority are in pretty good shape and they eat everything. But it's just that the food hasn't been tempered with. And I remember during the lockdowns as well, your supply chain for in the US for meat and things like that got really disrupted because it's so centralized.
Mm.
Yeah, and so I guess, yeah, go
We
ahead.
just add on that if you are eating food that does not support your well-being and help you think clearly, that is another tool that is used to dumb you down and get you addicted to eating food that really does not support your best interest. But if you can't think clearly, you can't make good choices. That supports their goal of really putting you in that corral.
Yeah, and if you don't eat well, your health goes down, and then you have to take the pills. I don't want to say the word, you know, the stuff they gave people in 2020, and then you might not be able to go to work. You get into debt. It seems like Lynette, every aspect of things are there to create a lot of profit for a few big corporations. And I'm not against profit, but this seems to be have been, there seems to be a lot of corruption between the big corporations and government, not just in the US, but here in the UK as well. So would you say that if we do get a currency collapse, a melt up, is that our best hope for people to wake up and realize what's going on? Or do you think they'll be able to impose some kind of digital control system?
Well, I think it's probably a bit of both of that, to be honest with you. I mean, people get blinded by the numbers, so they see things going up, but the real trend is the trend of the purchasing power of the currency. And that is easily reflected in day-to-day life by how much you can buy with this stuff, and what this $20 bill would have bought you a year ago, let alone 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 100 years ago. I mean, it's far, far different. Look, I'll be honest with you. When I first got divorced, I had 2 babies that I needed to support and feed. And, I'd go to the grocery store with the $20 bill, and I needed to make that last me as long as I could. My children never went hungry. What if that's all you have today to feed your family? I mean, what can you buy with it? Like virtually nothing, or just some garbage, some empty calorie, carbs. So I think it's really important for people to take back that power. But don't believe the melt up. That's probably your last opportunity to get into position. I mean, we're getting so many warnings, and just because they covered up what happened, 3-4 weeks ago. So, that was a nothing. I don't know that that's true. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that that was really something, and it got covered up because there had to be derivative explosions, those bets against all the interest rate stuff. And yet we haven't really seen that have an impact, even though on a global basis, we've seen central banks ratchet up rates, then, be a little choppy with it. So some central banks are raising rates, some were holding them, some were dropping rates. So that uncoordinated movement. And now it looks like globally central banks are trying to do a coordinated movement again. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, that's the bottom line, Mario. Do you think they're just throwing anything they can up on the wall to see if it's going to stick for a minute? And then when we get a big enough crisis that they either choose to not cover up, or, they're trying to do a controlled implosion, that proverbial soft landing that has never happened before, so that they stay in control and can shift us into that digital full surveillance currency. And I'm telling you, if we don't do like a very quiet and peaceful movement and convert the fiat money, the government debt-based money, into gold and silver and hold it in your possession, that really is such a huge key. Because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And your perception doesn't matter at all in a court of law. We have to take our power back. And in my opinion, the easiest way to do that is by becoming so self-sufficient and independent and holding real money outside of the system. They want you to think, well, the dollar gets stronger and gold gets weaker. No, that's a spot gold contract, and that's easy to manipulate. And a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. But in the physical only market, where it's not guided by the manipulated spot, those always break out first. That's where you see the truth or closer to the truth of the markets. But I will never sit here and count on Wall Street to tell me what's true, because, like you lived in the belly of the beast, I was a stockbroker at Shearson. I lived in the belly of the beast. And once you understand that, and it kind of strips away all the garbage, then even if you can't quite determine 100% of what's going on, at least looking at what they're doing, a deeper truth, and not to believe the lies, right?
Yeah, that's well said, Lynette. So could you tell the viewers where they can find you, and what kind of work you do, and how regularly you post and where you post?
Absolutely. We post very regularly, 3 to 5 videos a week. It kind of depends on what's going on. And you can find me on YouTube and Twitter at the Lynette Zang, and also on Instagram and Facebook at Lynette Zang. Our website is LynetteZang.com. And what I've done, I've been studying currency life cycles since my day as a stockbroker at Shearson since 1987. And I was there on Black Monday when right after that, they created the plunge protection team. So I can see their work in all of this. But my goal is to translate financial noise into understandable languages. And since I've been studying currency since 87, there are always these repeatable patterns that happen 100% of the time. So I developed a sound money strategy actually for myself based upon those repeatable patterns. It's not rocket science. It's not even really all that complicated. And that's what we do at Zang Enterprises is we help people, we meet them where they are on all those levels of the mantra. So the food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. We want to meet them where they are and then give them the tools and help them get to where they want to go in all of those levels. So we don't have our mantra channel open yet, but we are working on that. But we certainly have the whole community, the whole team to help people wherever they are. How can you get to where you want to go? That's critical for us. And we like human contact too. I'm old enough to remember when if you were not happy with something, you could get to the decision maker. Well, we're easy to get to, and we really want you to be happy because we actually really care about supporting community locally so you can have security in all of those areas by coming together because we don't have the time that I've had while I've been building out this urban farm and my bug out location. So local community is just critical, but also globally, because it's the central bank's job to support those entities, not the public. And it should be really obvious because in every single crisis, who got supported? Who benefited from those crises? How did that wealth transfer? Did it transfer to you? No, it did not, right? But with the sound money strategy, because we can't get out of the way, everybody's going to be impacted by it. But since wealth never disappears, it just shifts location. Wow, how about having it shift your way for a minute? So that's what the whole strategy is about. That's what Zang Enterprises is really about, is that community piece and helping people make educated decisions that they're putting their best interests first. That's who should be first. The individual, and then coming together as a community to help each other. Because I learned a long time ago that the reason why we are all here on this planet is to share the gifts that we've been given. Whatever those gifts are, and every single person has been given a gift. Every single person. And they're all different. Not one is better than the other. Come together, share what you know, share your skill sets, learn some new skills. How can you support your local community? And how can you support your global community so that this new system that's coming in place to take over for this dead system, how can we do that? We can do it if we come together. We can. I am so convinced of that. I am so convinced of that. Together, we can make a positive difference for not just a lot of people, but for generations to come.
I agree, Lynette, and yeah, those are very great words there, and I think it just goes to show that we need to stick together and keep stacking. So, Lynette, I wish you a great rest of the day, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
I look forward to it, and I really am. I've said this before, but we're gonna plan a trip out. Maybe I'll come out with my daughter next summer.
Great. And maybe Sarah and I will come out to see you as well. That would be nice.
That would be awesome. Just plan enough because I would totally take you guys up to the bug out and we can even do some interviews up there.
Great. All right. Thank you. Take care.